In the last video, we looked at the four vergences, the way functions appear in awareness, and the way a type tends to engage with them. In this video, we move to the next layer of Model L, the four currents. If Vergence asks, how does this information show up? Current asks a different question. Where does the metabolism want to go? The currents describe which functions are favoured, which are subdued, which are used as ends in themselves, and which are treated more as supporting means. In Model A, this is mostly known through the distinction between valued and unvalued functions, but in Model L, that simple two-part contrast is expanded into four: primary, complementary, supplementary, and ancillary current. Kumani's Model L document introduces the current groups as the tetrachotomy formed by the Tract Dichotomies, expanding the Model A valued/unvalued distinction into four groups. Before we define the four currents, it is worth pausing to see where we are in the Model L structure. In the earlier video on capacity, we asked how accessible a function is. Is it foregrounded or backgrounded? Is it easy to sustain or resistant and tiring? Then, in the video on Vergence, we asked how a function appears in awareness. Is it explicit or implicit? Is it something the type engages by default or something it pivots into more selectively? Current asks a third question, not how easy is this function, not how visible is this function, but what direction does the type favour? In other words, current is about value flow. It shows which functions the type leans into as meaningful ends, and which functions are treated more as supporting means. So we are not replacing capacity or Vergence, we are adding another layer to the same map. In classical Model A, we are used to speaking about valued and unvalued functions. Valued functions are not just useful, they are the aspects a type tends to lean into as meaningful in their own right. Unvalued functions may still be used, sometimes very skillfully, but they are usually treated more as tools, supports, or means to something else. Model L keeps that distinction, but it makes it more precise. Instead of only asking whether a function is valued or unvalued, Model L asks two questions. First, is this function favoured or menial? Second, is its output prevalent or subdued? When those two questions cross, the old two-part contrast opens into four currents. Primary current corresponds to the familiar valued functions. Ancillary current corresponds to the familiar unvalued functions. But between them, Model L adds two missing middle zones, complementary and supplementary. So this video is really about expanding the old valued and unvalued distinction into a fuller four-part map of value flow. To understand the four currents, we need to separate two questions that are often bundled together in Model A. The first question is this function favoured or menial? A favoured function is treated as meaningful in its own right. The type does not merely use it to get somewhere else. It is part of what the type wants to cultivate, protect, express, or move toward. A menial function is different. It may still be useful, it may even be strong, but it is more likely to be treated as a means, something that serves another aim rather than being prized for its own sake. The second question is this function prevalent or subdued? A prevalent function has a stronger output stream. It shows up more forcefully in the direction of the type's metabolism. A subdued function is quieter. It may still matter, but it does not dominate the overall flow in the same way. So current is built from two axes. Favoured versus menial tells us whether a function is treated as an end or as a means. Prevalent versus subdued tells us whether that function forms a stronger or quieter stream in the type's output. Cross those two axes and we get the four currents: primary, complementary, supplementary, and ancillary. The first of the four currents is the primary current. This is the easiest to connect with classical Model A because it corresponds to what we usually call the valued functions. But in Model L terms, we can be more specific. A primary function is both favoured and prevalent. It is favoured because the type treats this kind of information as meaningful in its own right. It is not just a tool, It is something the type naturally wants to cultivate, express, protect, or move toward. And it is prevalent because it forms a strong output stream in the metabolism. It is not merely valued quietly in the background, it has force, direction, and weight. So the primary current shows where a type's metabolism most naturally wants to go. These are the functions that feel most central to the type's own sense of purpose, preference, and direction. In simple terms, primary current is not just what the type can do, it is what the type tends to value and push forward. The second current is the complementary current. This is one of the places where Model L adds something that classical Model A does not directly show. A complementary function is still favoured. It still belongs to the side of the metabolism that the type treats as meaningful, worthwhile, and worth preserving. But unlike the primary current, it is subdued. So the complementary current is not the main forward-driving stream. It does not usually carry the same force, weight, or outward push. Instead, it works more quietly. It supports the favoured direction of the type without necessarily becoming the dominant expression of that direction. So where primary current says, this is what the type pushes forward, complementary current says, this is what the type still favours, but in a quieter and more supporting form. In simple terms, complementary current is valued, but less forceful. It matters, but it does not lead the flow. Kimani defines complementary current as having no direct Model A equivalent. These blocks are favoured by the TIM, but remain relatively subdued in their throughputs. The third current is the supplementary current. This is the opposite pattern from complementary current. Complementary was favoured, but subdued. Supplementary is menial, but prevalent. That means these functions are not usually treated as meaningful ends in themselves. The type may use them. It may even use them powerfully, but they are more likely to be handled as tools, supports, or working mechanisms in service of something else. This is important because supplementary current shows that a function can have a strong output stream without being especially valued. It can be active, visible, and forceful, but still not be where the type wants to live. So the supplementary current is like a powerful industrial support system. It does real work, it carries weight, it may even shape the visible behavior of the type, but it is not the prized direction of the metabolism. In simple terms, supplementary current is strong as a means, not valued as an end. The fourth current is the ancillary current. This is the current that most directly corresponds to what Model A calls the unvalued functions. In Model L terms, ancillary functions are both menial and subdued. They are menial because the type does not usually treat them as meaningful ends in themselves. They are more likely to be regarded as background tools, utilities, or necessary supports, and they are subdued because they do not form a strong output stream in the type's metabolism. So unlike the supplementary current, these functions are not usually forceful or prominent. They are quieter, more backgrounded, and less central to the type's direction of movement. But that does not mean they are useless. Ancillary current still has a place in the system. It can support, stabilize, or provide background maintenance. It may become relevant when circumstances require it, but it is not where the type naturally invests its sense of value, purpose, or forward movement. In simple terms, ancillary current is useful when needed, but it is not where the type wants to live. Now we can see the four currents as a single structure. The first axis is value. A function may be favoured, meaning the type treats it as meaningful in its own right, or it may be menial, meaning the type treats it more as a means, a tool, or a support. The second axis is throughput. A function may be prevalent, meaning it forms a stronger output stream in the type's metabolism, or it may be subdued, meaning it remains quieter and less forceful. When we cross those two axes, we get the four currents. Primary current is favoured and prevalent, valued as an end and strongly expressed. Complementary current is favoured but subdued, still valued, but quieter. Supplementary current is menial but prevalent, not prized as an end, but still active and forceful. Ancillary current is menial and subdued, useful as a background support, but not central to the type's direction. The important point is this: value and strength are not the same thing. A function can be powerful without being especially valued, and a function can be valued without being the loudest or most forceful stream. That is why Model L needs 4 currents rather than only the older contrast between valued and unvalued. Now that we have the conceptual map, we can place the 4 currents back into the Model L layout. This is where the structure becomes more precise. In Model A, the valued functions appear as one broad group, and the unvalued functions appear as another. But in Model L, that same contrast is expanded across 16 positions. Primary current includes the functions that are both favoured and prevalent. Complementary current includes functions that are favoured but subdued. Supplementary current includes functions that are menial but prevalent. And ancillary current includes functions that are both menial and subdued. Notice that these groups are not simply one arm of the cross or one neat row of the diagram. They are distributed patterns across the whole Model L structure. That matters because Model L is not just adding more boxes to Model A. It is showing how different functional properties intersect. A position is not only strong or weak, overt or tacit, valued or unvalued. It sits at the crossing point of several structural dimensions. So the current groups tell us one specific thing about a function, whether the type favours it as a direction of value and whether it carries a stronger or quieter output stream. That is the layer we are isolating here. Now we can connect current to something more familiar in socionics, Quadra values. In classical socionics, the valued functions are one of the main ways we understand a type's quadra. Alpha, beta, gamma, and delta are not just social clubs or personality atmospheres. They describe different patterns of information that a type tends to treat as meaningful. Model L keeps that idea, but makes the structure more explicit. The primary current shows the most direct value flow of the type. These are the functions that are both favoured and prevalent. They show what the type most naturally leans into, pushes forward, and treats as important in its own right. So when we talk about a type's quadra, we are largely talking about the world opened up by its primary current. But Model L then asks us to go further, because the type does not only have primary functions, it also has complementary functions, still favoured but quieter. Supplementary functions, active and forceful but used more as means, and ancillary functions, backgrounded utilities useful when needed but not central to the type's value direction. So current gives us a richer way to talk about quadra values. It shows not only what a type values, but also what it supports, what it uses, and what it leaves in the background. To make the connection with quadra values more precise, we need 2 more terms, alignment and polarity. Alignment asks, what kind of judgment flow does the type favour? In older socionics language, this is close to the contrast between merry and serious. In Model L terms, synergizing types favour the FE to TI kind of flow. That means shared mood, collective clarity, common frameworks, and a sense of order that people can participate in together. Optimizing types favour the TE to FI kind of flow. That means usefulness, economy, personal value, practical results, and the alignment of resources with what actually matters. So alignment tells us what kind of rational, or judging, flow the type treats as meaningful. Polarity asks a different question. What direction does the type's perceptual flow lean toward? Abstracting types favour the SI to NE direction. They begin from lived experience, familiarity, and sensory continuity, then open that into possibility, interpretation, and new ways of seeing. Concretizing types favour the NI to SE direction. They begin from inner trajectory, implication, or intention, then push toward concrete manifestation, impact, and resolution. So alignment tells us what kind of value order the type favours. Polarity tells us the direction in which perception tends to move. When these combine, we get the familiar quadra value patterns. Alpha is synergizing and abstracting. Beta is synergizing and concretizing. Gamma is optimizing and concretizing. Delta is optimizing and abstracting. The current map then shows how these values are distributed through the full Model L structure. Primary current is the most direct expression of that quadra value flow, but the other currents show the supporting layers. What the type still favors quietly, what it uses powerfully as a means, and what it keeps in the background. So, what does current add to the way we read a type? It gives us a cleaner distinction between value, output, and usefulness. Without this distinction, it is easy to collapse several different things together. We might assume that a strong function must also be valued, but supplementary current shows that a function can be active, visible, and forceful, while still being used mainly as a means. We might also assume that a valued function must always be loud or dominant, but complementary current shows that something can still be favoured, meaningful, and worth preserving, even when its output is quieter. And we might assume that an unvalued function has no real role. But ancillary current shows that even background utilities still help maintain the system, so current helps us avoid a flat reading of valued and unvalued functions. It lets us ask a more precise question. Is this function part of what the type favours, and is it part of the stronger output stream? Once those two questions are separated, the structure becomes much clearer. Primary shows what the type pushes forward, complementary shows what the type still favours quietly, supplementary shows what the type uses powerfully, ancillary shows what the type keeps in the background. That is the practical value of the four currents. So that brings us to the end of the four currents. We began with the old Model A contrast between valued and unvalued functions. Then we separated that into two questions. Is the function favoured or used more as a means? And is it part of a stronger output stream or a quieter one? From those two questions, we get the four currents. Primary current. What the type pushes forward. Complementary current. What the type still favours, but more quietly. Supplementary current. What the type uses powerfully as a means. Ancillary current. What the type keeps in the background. The main lesson is that value and output are not the same thing. A function can be valued without being loud. A function can be strong without being prized as an end, and even a background function still has a role in the system. In the next video, we will move from current to perspective. Instead of asking what the type favours and leans into, we will ask how a function handles information from within its block. Does it set the point of view? Does it supply what is needed? Does it compose the information directly? Or does it support the process from a more secondary position? That will take us into the ensemble groups necessitating, accepting, producing, and supplying. So the next step is not about value flow. It is about the perspective from which information is dispensed and composed.